Hey there, this is Angie with ADS here to bring you the very best in marketing and branding tips, as well as business tips for those of you who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and personal branders. Welcome and thanks so much for being here. And today you are in for a treat, my dears. I am interviewing the Tim Lewis in the UK, lovelies. He is in the UK. Oh yes, love it. Oh, I'm so jealous. And he is the author of Social Media Networking. Yes. And furthermore, he has his own publishing company. So we are talking all about self-publishing. If you have a book in you this year, you've been working on it, you've been thinking about it, you've got to watch this because I'm telling you, self-publishing is the way to go. It's the way I'm thinking of going for my own book. And these are all the reasons why. Tim, it's awesome to have you here at the ADS agency. You know, finally, I get to chat with you in person. You've had me on your show. Oh no, not another live show.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome to be on your show. And so I said, I have to have you over on the ADS agency YouTube just to chat and introduce you to my people. If you don't know Tim Lewis, he is an awesome conference junkie, self-proclaimed conference junkie, which that's how I met him.
Yeah.
We met at Social Media Marketing World last year, just on the precipice of all this COVIDness. I remember we were having brunch just as the news was hitting, and we were all kind of sitting there like, should we be here? Like, we don't know. Yeah, that was a funky time. I'm so glad I got to meet you there. So loves conferences and traveling and social media. So quick shameless plug for his book, which I do have.
Yep.
Social Media Networking. Yeah. How to, and the subtitle is so intriguing, how to use social media to get the job you want, find love, ooh la la, and get business success and boost your travel experience. Super. Yeah. So this is going to be a quick read. So definitely get it. And he's published so many other books, which are so fun. I definitely want you to show those through his own self-publishing company. Yeah. Time Shock. There's several.
Do a little parade of my books.
Yeah.
I haven't got, for some reason, I haven't got a copy of the third book. I need to get the third book in the Magpies and Magic series.
Yeah. So we're going to link to those in the description below for those of you who are watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on podcast, we'll absolutely have those links available too, so you can connect with Tim. You started your own company, Stone Hemp Press, originally just so you could publish your own books, right? Like that's why you set it up to begin with.
Well, yes. I mean, it's just one of those things that a lot of self-publishers do. They start a company to make their books seem like it's, it's over in, I mean, it's not so true now, actually, and it's not really necessary to self-publish. You don't need to set up a company to self-publish, but certainly in the more professional end of people like setting up companies. And actually, if you want to do other things, and if you want to do, this is the thing, I do so many things in my business. I do social media consulting, I do process stuff, I do all sorts of things. And having a company is just a great way of doing that. So that's kind of like another topic, but yeah, I mean, a lot of self-publishers do have companies, but you don't need one at all. You don't need any kind of business structure to self-publish as such.
Gotcha. Right. And so so it gives you just another unique side to all of this and an experience of self-publishing. But I've been on your indie author chat. For those of you who are interested in the self-publishing world, you should absolutely check out #indie author chat. It comes on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern, if you're in Eastern time like me, or that's 8 o'clock for UK time, right?
Okay. And noon Pacific, and 9 p.m. European time. If you're in Australia, then you've got to get up in the middle of the morning. So unfortunately, but because it's a Twitter chat, you can always look at it in historic after the fact. So you just do a search on #indie author chat, and you can scroll back to each Wednesday, and you can see each of the particular topics. It's also summarized in a blog post on the Alliance of Independent Authors self-publishing advice.org website. I think that's what it's called.
Cool.
Because they, yeah, I mean, I run it on their behalf. So they are one of the biggest, well, they are the biggest, actually, the biggest kind of representative body for self-published authors. So that's the people behind Indie Author Chat, but I run it for them. And I get all the guests, and I come up with all the topics and write all the questions, and sometimes the answers.
Yes. Well, it's really fun, and I love the people who are involved with it. They're all awesome, and they have a range of experiences in the types of books they write. And so it's really cool to be a part of that. And I have to mention, I think this is so cool because you mentioned it so much about traveling to all 50 states. So I have to know, like, and I know COVID kind of messed up your track for that, but how many states are you at so far?
I'm at 22 states.
Wow.
I've actually visited Atlanta last. Did I do it last year? Yeah, I did it year before last. So like 2020 has just been wiped off the kind of the map. I was thinking in 2019 I visited Atlanta, so I've done Georgia. What I've been looking at, because the whole idea is I'm 50 in when am I 50 in 2023. Yeah,
I saw it on your site. Yes.
In February 2023. So it's going to be quite tight to do, but I've come up with a cunning plan that's going to hopefully get me to do it. In that there's lots of little towns and places on the corner of multiple states. So it probably take me to some really obscure US cities. Like there's somewhere, I think it's called Huntington, which is on the corner of Ohio, West Virginia, and Indiana, something like that. So I'm just going to be like places that I'm going to like Google them and make sure they're not like really, really terrible places, and just get in there. And Wikipedia is your absolute friend when it comes to airports in the US, because you go onto Wikipedia page for an airport in the US and it shows you everywhere that they go and fly, every airline and where they fly to. So you can kind of find somewhere like that, and then you can find, well, there's one flight a day to Denver. And then you have to plan for like, how do I get to there from Denver? And you have to kind of do a little loop to go to these multiple places. So that's totally unself-publishing related, but that's how to plan US state travel trip. Is Wikipedia is your friend.
Very cool. Well, if anybody can do it, I know you can. So I'll be excited to see, the progression on the maps for you.
I'm a bit worried it might be like that film Brewster's Millions, where he's trying to spend all his money in the time, and right at the end they give him a little bit of extra money. Because I'm worried that they're going to suddenly decide to make Puerto Rico and Washington DC states for 50. I've been to Washington DC, so that's not a problem. But I'd have to have a rush trip to Puerto Rico if they suddenly make a mistake before I'm 50. So that's a possibility that I've got to look out for as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so you have so many cool things going on, with the books and all the self-publishing you're doing, and even the podcast on self-publishing, which I am now officially checking out. And so the first thing I want to ask is, what do you feel is like the number one thing newbies to the self-publishing world, which would be admittedly me, and others? I have several friends who are like, I got to get this book done. What would be your number one piece of advice to the newbies out there to self-publishing?
Well, somebody actually asked me this on a podcast the other day when I was interviewed.
Oh, really?
It was funny because it was a podcast about self-publishing, about a self-publishing podcast. So it was kind of like, but the main advice is to check out lots of good sources of information. So that is things like Indie Author Chat and going to the Alliance of Independent Authors blog, because there are lots of very good pieces of advice out there about how to self-publish books. From a general perspective, be aware that if you want a good product, you've got to pay for it. So a lot of people historically, because you've always been able to self-publish books, like people like Charles Dickens self-published books, like way back, but it was a lot harder to do because the technology wasn't there to self-publish for cheaply or easily. And you ended up with like a whole garage or a whole house, a whole room of your house full of paperback books that you had to try and sell to people, and it wasn't clear how you could do it. So this is kind of in the publishing world. Ironically, both my parents worked in different ways in publishing.
Oh, really?
I worked in IT for like 20 odd years, and it's kind of my dad used to work on printing machines. He wrote manuals for these big printing machines that they actually used to print books and things on. And my mum used to work for, she was an editor at one of the publishing companies in London.
Wow.
But in 2011, which is ironically around the time that my wife died, which we'll come on to probably later, but everything changed with Kindle. Now, you know those Kindle devices that you see?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so much that obviously having Kindle devices and ebooks and things makes a big difference, but what they Amazon created this platform called Kindle Direct Publishing, and that still exists. And what that allowed people to do was you can set up you just need an Amazon account, actually. You don't need anything else. And you set up you go to KDP, I think it's kdp.amazon.com, something like that. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll tell you what it is.
Yes.
And you set it up. You set up an account on that thing with your app, just logging in with your Amazon account. I'd probably suggest actually using a different account to the one you buy things with, but there are reasons for and against setting up a different account. The advantage to having your own account is that if you've got an Amazon Prime, then you can get Prime delivery for your author copies. But the disadvantage is that obviously it's all mixed up legally. I think you could get them into weird kind of legal issues.
Oh, wow.
Because your personal versus your business account and the rest of it, depending on how you set it up. So you log on to that and you can simply say, create a book and ebook or a paperback. And then it's a case of going in and filling in all the details about the book. It's about 3 or 4 pages. And it is very like intimidating when you do it for the first time, because there's things like, what category should this be? Whether you should be like KDP Select or non-KDP Select. It asks you to upload an EPUB or you can actually use a Word doc and just upload that. I wouldn't recommend that. And then like they approve most things that don't have massive amounts of spelling mistakes and don't have big errors. You can upload a cover file and then your book is available for sale on Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, all of the Amazon sites around the world, which isn't totally global. And that just transformed the book market globally. And another thing that came not very long afterwards is what's called print on demand. So these books, like for example, this book here, I'm not got an enormous like load of these that I'm selling out of my garage anymore. What happens if you go to Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk or Amazon.de, the German one, and you go on to, you'll see this book listed. This book 2 in the series, so you probably want to buy book 1 first. If you buy it, what happens is that in Amazon systems, they a little signal goes from that website to a warehouse. Well, it actually goes to a factory somewhere in your particular country, and they print 1 copy of the book, and then that book is sent to you. They charge you like about, I think it's about like $2 or $3 for this, and this book's about sort of $6, something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. And so you're not holding stock. You're not like, so anybody, and that's the site. That's now, it used to be a different service. It used to be called CreateSpace, but now that's all in KDP.Amazon. They've merged it all into the same thing. So you've got ebook and you've got paperback book. So as you see, it's basically opened up the whole market to anybody. There's no real restrictions anymore on who can have a book available, at least on Amazon. There are other services for ebooks, and they're also self-publishing. There are print-on-demand services that make it available in bookstores to be ordered. Now, what I always tell people is that bookstore distribution is something where traditional publishing companies still have an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can make your book, say, you can go, there's a service called Ingram Spark, which Ingram is, I think, the US's biggest bookstore distributor of they distribute books to bookstores.
Yeah, I've seen their name, Ingram Spark.
Yeah. So if you self-publish your book on Ingram Spark, then it's similar to Amazon, but it makes it so that if somebody in a bookstore, they have they usually have a whole load of, I don't know how much you know behind the scenes at bookstores, but they order books.
Very little.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like bookstores only have a limited capacity for books that they ever have. But a lot of bookstores, if you go in and you ask for a particular book, they will order it for you. And the system, one of the systems they use, especially in the US, I think it's a different one in the UK called Gardeners, but in the US, they go onto this Ingram terminal, and they will type in like the ISBN number or the description, and then it will come up with like Andrea's book about Scotland, and then they can order it there. So having it available on Ingram Spark means that a bookstore can order it, but it doesn't mean they're going to stock it. To stock it, you've got to convince them to buy the book and put it on their shelves. And that is something where having a team of salesmen, like a traditional publisher, obviously gives you a massive advantage. But, and I did an example of this like a few years back. I think it was about 3 years back. So you've been to Social Media Marketing World. It's like the world's premier social media marketing conference by miles, right? And after 1 year, I think it was 2017, I decided, I was in Boston because I was going, this wasn't actually this was before I did the States thing, but I was in Boston and I thought, I know, I'm going to go into this Barnes and Noble store in this shopping center in Boston, or shopping mall, or mall, as you would call it. Yeah. And just see in the marketing department how many books are from speakers at Social Media Marketing World, because I know about 90% of the speakers there were published or traditionally published or self-published authors. How many books do you think there were by speakers at Social Media Marketing World out of the 70, 80 odd speakers there in the marketing section of that store?
I would hope a great percentage, but I'm going to guess more like less than 10%.
It was 2.
2 of them. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, but this comes to like the physical space thing. It's like, this was just one shelf, there's probably about 100 books in the marketing section of this store. But the reason I say that is that people think like lots of these people were traditionally published authors. Their books will not be like, unless their book is brand new, and even if it is brand new sometimes, your books are not necessarily going to be available to buy and stocked in lots of shops. Unless you're like, I mean, even like, I think there was like one Gary Vee book there, and like even lots of these very big, there wasn't even every one of Seth Godin's books, like all these big marketing people. So if your entire objective is to get your book into bookstores, then that is a good argument for being traditionally published. But even then, you're like likely not to have it. You've got to take a photograph of it soon in the bookstore. So that's the downside of self-publishing in terms of bookstore distribution, because you just can't. It's a lot harder. I mean, I think a lot of self-published authors will go to like their local Barnes and Noble or Waterstones or whatever the store is, and then they can kind of, if they haggle enough and they can say, especially if it's like a book about a local area, then they would probably stock it. But bookstores, it's a really, really harsh business, bookstores. I mean, they make very, very low returns on anything, because it's kind of like all these expensive stocks just sitting there. And yeah, so that's kind of the publishing space at the moment. And self-publishing is a very valid way to go in terms of getting your book out there. And the advantage you've got over a traditional publisher is that you haven't got to go around submitting it everywhere, and you haven't got to get an agent. And the other advantage is that you get considerably more royalties as a self-published author. So for a typical kind of ebook, I think it's about 25% that a traditional publisher will give you. For a self-publisher, it's about 70%. Now for paperbacks, it's slightly different. It's kind of about 50% you get once you take away the cost of printing the book, which makes a big difference. Then coming back to the disadvantage of self-publishing, obviously, if you get your books traditionally published by Riley or HarperCollins or somebody like that, they obviously cover all the costs of editing, cover design, and they often will pay you in advance from the royalties. But those advances are really low now. I mean, most of the time they're like a couple of, maybe $1,000 or something along those lines.
Wow.
So again, it's that kind of choice for a lot of, I mean, I never ever thought really, as soon as I found out about self-publishing, I never wanted, because I didn't want people having control over my books and the sort of things that I wrote. So yeah, for me, it was obvious to do self-publishing, but I know for a lot of other people, there's this appeal. But I think that a lot of the trouble is that people have this glamorous idea that being traditionally published is going to be some sort of unicorn-clad thing that they can say, oh, I'm traditionally published. And it's like, well, it's a little bit of cachet to it, I suppose, but it's not necessarily going to make much difference, because most people don't know who the publisher is of a book, really. If you get like selected for like doing a dummies book or something, then people might be impressed. Or there are some ones like Wiley where people have got they've got a little bit of reputation in particular areas, but for most books, like you can list hard. I mean, like, who knows who Harry Potter is? Like, I do actually know who Harry Potter is published by, but it's kind of, you remember the books and the authors, but you don't necessarily remember who the publisher is most of the time.
Right, exactly. So I do think that's true. I had probably 2, maybe 3 years ago now. Gosh, I had a good conversation with a friend of mine who's a ghostwriter, and he mentioned how, this choice you're speaking of that authors have to make, it really boils down to your objectives. Does it really more so matter to you about the fame and the glorious idea of being traditionally published and being in a bookstore, or do you care more about the money? And then you hear people say that, you're not going to get rich off of your books anyway, so you should scrap that idea altogether. But you just hear so much off of, everyone has a different opinion.
Yeah, well, I can give you my opinion about
please,
how to make money from books. So in my experience, there are 2 or 3. I'll say 2 until I remember what the third one is. 2 ways to make money from books. The first way that a lot of self-published authors do, especially genre authors. So, for example, you're in Atlanta, which famously had all the Walking Dead stuff, and very associated with zombies.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who've written like serial zombie fiction when it was a big thing. I think it's still a thing. I think people who read zombie books, they read like Zombie Apocalypse or whatever. There are people who do that, and it can be the same with fantasy or science fiction or anything, but there are certain genres it suits better than others. And literally what they are doing, they've almost got like a production line where they are writing one book. They've got like an editor or somebody or cover designer who is working on their last book while they're working on the next book in the series. So they might have like 15 books in a series where they're writing like zombie Zombie Adventure in Atlanta 1, Zombie Adventure in Atlanta 2, 3, 4, and they're just churning out like a book a month. And the advantage of that is that as soon as people have literally finished one book, and then the next book's available, and they can go on to buy that. And lots of people buy on and buy on and buy. And it's also, I mean, the issue, what I kind of got into social media marketing because I was trying to work out how to sell books. And ironically, with my first book, like the Time Shop book, which was like 2060, you could advertise on Facebook, even like a 99-cent book, and just about make a profit on it. And you can advertise it and get it into an Amazon chart, and then it'll start selling more. But since about 2017, 18, the prices for Facebook ads are like, so to actually sell a copy of a book, a single book, you're talking like, depending on the market again, but you're talking like $5 or so, which means that, like, yeah, you can advertise it on Facebook. You're going to lose money. But if you are selling a series of 15 books, okay, everybody who buys the first book is not necessarily going to buy the second book. But like, let's say 70% of people do, or 20% of people do. That means that, you know, from selling one book, you're going to sell potentially 15 books. And that could be like $50 or $75, depending on your price point. So advertising a series is still very possible. So there is a lot to be said for the kind of almost industrial self-publishing people. And they're, the biggest proponents of this are a group called 20 Books to 50K. They run a conference in Las Vegas every year, but they are very much what I would call the industrial school of self-publishing. The second way to make money from books, which is kind of applicable more for non-fiction and for everybody in a way, is not making money from books, but making money via selling something else. So, for example, well, it was kind of actually the original idea of this was not so much to make me money. I mean, it's made some money, but it's not made a lot. But this was to get me speaking gigs at conferences. And I was planning, and I might actually get around to finishing it at some point, doing a load of social media courses to sell, like online courses for like $50, $100, whatever. So having a book gives you authority in a topic, especially if it's niche or niche or however you want to pronounce it.
I like niche.
Niche. So let's say moving to Scotland was your niche, because I know you've been to Scotland and then you come back again. You could write like the number one guide to moving to Scotland from the US. And then you could sell that for a little bit, like a couple of dollars or whatever. You're not going to make any money really from the book, but at the end of the book, you could say, sign up for my $200 made for you guide for how to do this. And then again, it's like you can advertise it. You can do it because, you know, one of every 10 or one of 100 books, somebody's going to buy the $200 course or $2,000 or whatever. So those are the two main ways that people are making money out of books. Books are very powerful, but they're not necessary. And generally speaking, you're not going to make huge amounts of money from just one book. But yeah, it's a way of building authority. I mean, it's like having a YouTube show. You've probably got authority from this show. Having a podcast gives you authority, but having a book can give you even more authority. So yeah, I mean, those are the two ways. I'm sure there's another way that I've forgotten about. I'm sure I've done this before, and there's three. I just can't remember what the third way is. But
it'll come to you, I'm sure. But
yeah, it's usually through selling something else, either having a series or selling something else beyond your book. If you want to make money from your book.
I think that's really great. And you bring up a great point about a series. I've been looking into marketing a series. So it's so cool to learn that you have experience in that now. The books that you've written. One lady I've been listening to, she's a YA author named Sarah Cannon. And she recommends using that first book in your series as a loss leader, really almost even giving it away for free, depending on your cost and all this, or a very, very reduced price, and hooking people that way so that they do purchase your other book.
The first book, we're going back to this. This is actually 3 ebooks. I made it into 1 paperback book.
Oh,
but
wow.
the first book, the Time Shop book, is free on Amazon. It's not actually especially great written because it was the first book I did, but that's free. And then the other 2 books are, I think the second book's like $1 and the third book's like $2 or something along those lines. One thing I would say that is a warning against the first book being free is you get way worse reviews from free books than you do for paid books.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sucks.
Now, the reason why is that people who don't like your book for some reason, because, well, if people have had to pay for a book, they look through the description, they look at the settings, they might look at the sample and decide whether they like it or not. If it's free, a lot of people just click buy and just download it. So by having that purchase decision, you get rid of a lot of people who just casually bought your book because they thought it was something else, or they thought it was kind of like some other thing. They will leave bad reviews. So having free books does tend to decrease, especially if there's like a genre like time travel, like this book was, where there's a historical fiction type of time travel where people go back and they just write in huge detail about everything. My book's not that. And there's also time travel romance, which my book is not time travel romance. So that's something to be aware of with free books, but it does, I do it because it works. And I've been trying to set up my second book to make it first book free in series. It's not as easy as you think, because Amazon will only set a book as permanently free if we've price matched it with different retailers. So you have to set it free on other retailers and then go back to Amazon and say it's free on the other retailers. Can you make it free? But they take ages to admit that it is, and then eventually they'll set it as free. It's a bit of a hack in a way. It's not. Amazon will let you, if you go exclusive with Amazon, you can set it free for a number of days. So like about 5 days in a row. And that can be fantastic, but you can't set it permanently free. But if you don't go exclusive with Amazon, you can then put your book permanently free by forcing them to price match with other retailers. So it's one of those interesting strategy things.
That is interesting. There's just so much into that, like pricing and all of that, to think about. If you are doing a series, then do you feel it's very important to have them available to release relatively soon, one after the other? Or do you think it matters? Like, do you think your audience would wait,
I think ideally you want them to be available pretty soon, one after each other. But on the other hand, I wouldn't do it. I don't want to release them all simultaneously, but I would wait like a month or so. And the reason for that is that in the way that there's a new release chart on Amazon, which is like books in the last month. So you don't necessarily, you almost want like what your first book to be in that. And then the next book comes in. With my Magpies and Magic series, I did one of those books a year. So, and the funny thing was, like, honestly, I thought hardly any of them sold at all. Like, I think that actually they're some of the best books I've written, but nobody bought, because it was it's a weird fantasy comedy genre, which I find very hard to find in a niche for and to market. But with the third book, I released it as an ebook like a year afterwards, and then I got in the post, I got a letter from somebody, so handwritten letter saying, like, I really like your first 2 books, but I notice it's not available as paperback. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I thought, well, nobody's, but because I finished the series, because I thought, like, well, I might as well finish the series off, like 3 books in a row. And it was really just, and so I thought, well, nobody's really reading it, so it doesn't matter about the paperback version. But as I say, I got a letter in the post from somebody who was a fan who wanted the third book in the series in paperback.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's like, however like little you think people are reading your books, or however few people you think are watching your live show, or however few people are like reading your blog, there's always people out there doing it. Usually, I mean, it's actually really hard to produce stuff and have nobody look at it ever. But we always tend to think that nobody's looking at our books or nobody's reading our stuff. So
Yeah.
but I would suggest you're better off, if you can, writing it all. I mean, there is an argument to writing a whole series and then kind of releasing it as you go, rather than write, release. But I'm generally too slack to do that too much. So
I hear you. Well, I can't hold you forever, but I do want to end with one big question. I know this, I have so many questions they could all take, days to answer, I'm sure. But give us your best tips on budgeting. If you are self-publishing for the first time, then what should people be thinking about when budgeting for that book, that whole project in general? Because there's a lot of costs that can go into it, and I'm sure they can skyrocket and get exorbitant. But what would be your best tips on, when people are thinking about their budget for a project?
Well, it depends.
Classic.
I'm actually one of the few people who has done like blog posts and things on my begin self-publishing thing, where I've had a go at trying to estimate how much these things cost. The single biggest cost usually for most authors is editing and or cover design. There are ways to save money on everything, basically. So don't think it's going to be cheap. Like, I think thousands rather than hundreds. One thing I would say is you probably want to start, if you can, with a small project, because then you can learn the ropes of how to doing it, and potentially a small project could also bring in a little bit of money that can help you pay for later projects. And also, if you make a massive mistake on a small project, then it's like you can correct it on your. So that's why I started off. Well, I actually started off with a novella because my planning went horribly wrong, and it was supposed to be a novel, but I only wrote 20,000 words. But it was a good way to start because I learned how to do it. And I would probably start with just an ebook. I mean, you can self-publish very thin paperbacks, but ebooks can be any length, really. I think you can always take a blog post and make it into an ebook and put it up on the Amazon store.
I have a tiny ebook that was definitely an experience trying to figure out getting up. Yeah.
I mean, editing is like one of these, because a lot of people will be like, oh, well, self-published books are never edited. And that's generally not true. I would say that a lot of the time, a lot of self-publishers, especially those starting out, myself included, go for somebody they know to edit their book. But editing is a skill beyond just proofreading and checking grammar and error checking and the rest of it. Actual like decent professional editors who you can, because most of the editors now are not working for publishers. They are like contractors or they are freelancers. So you can go, there's a website called readsy.com where they have, and it's used both by traditional publishers and by self-publishers. It's called reedsy.com.
Yeah, I just stumbled upon that one.
And that's a marketplace for editors, cover designers. I think they do marketing as well. And so you can, I mean, I think somebody was saying they hired like the same person who did Stephen King's cover design to do their book.
So cool.
No, I mean, with covers, there are actually, so both this cover and this cover, both from a company called demonza.com. And I save money on them because a lot of cover designers, what they do is they create what's called pre-designed covers. So Demonza are actually quite expensive for a lot of their covers, but they create basically these they create whole sheets of these covers with they just got your title and the thing and the design, and you can just buy the pre-designed cover and change the name and the thing, and that's a way of getting a more expensive cover than necessarily the one you thought you were going to do. And I've known some people who've actually bought pre-designed covers and then written the book based on what the cover looks like.
Wow.
So like this one, I mean, this like social media networking, it wasn't clear what on earth the cover should look like. So I saw this design and I'm like, oh, I like that. It kind of looks abstract-y. So that's one way to save money on covers. In terms of editing, like there are tools like Pro Writing Aid where you can go on and that'll give you lots of tips for sort of grammar and spelling and the like. Because the better your book is when you send it to an editor, the better it's going to be. Which might sound like I'm sending it to an editor, they should sort out all the spelling mistakes, but actually that's like terrible, because they will just be sorting out your spelling mistakes and they won't be looking at the structure of the story or anything like that. Those are the kind of higher level things that you want an editor to be doing, especially one who really, I mean, if you work with an editor who really knows the genre, and this is what people who like really, like, a lot of the more professional end of self-publishers will do, those really specialist editors in a particular genre will know what sells and what doesn't sell and what like people expect. So if it was a zombie book, they might say, well, you've got to have the main protagonist die at the end or something along those lines, because that's what sells in zombie books. And if you just had somebody who was checking your grammar, they wouldn't tell you that. So that is kind of what editors do for people. But editing is expensive because people are paying by their time. I mean, anything where you're paying people by their time and it takes them a long time to create something, obviously it's going to cost a lot. So that's it. Yeah, it's not going to be cheap. But the shorter your book, just in general, in terms of editing or anything, the lower the cost will be.
Very cool. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Tim, I could keep you here forever and ever and pick your brain about all the wonderful things you know, but this was such a wonderful beginning for people who are, starting to look in this space of self-publishing, what to do, and so I love all the tips you gave today about budget and marketing and series even, which is really cool, and that argument about traditional versus self-publishing is really good. So thank you so much. And I want everyone to know how to find you. Basically, they can go to stonehemppress.com, is it? For your site? Stonehemppress.com.
I need to rearrange all my websites and everything at the moment, like everybody does. Stonehemppress.com is my home site, and you'll find all my books there, and you'll find I've actually started to do show notes for the live show there as well. Now I have another site called beginselfpublishing.com, which is my old podcast, which I haven't done an episode for a while, but there's quite a lot of old episodes in there that are quite useful. And that site includes a 6-part guide to self-publishing that I did. I need to rearrange that and make it a bit more obvious. So yes, stonehemppress.com. I mean, probably the best place is just to connect with me on Twitter at stonehemppress, or Instagram at stonehemppress. You can see a trend here. I think where else am I? It's like LinkedIn. I'm Timothy Lewis, but you'll never find me. But you might find me connected to Andrew on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Stonehemppress.com is probably the best place to start. And you can hire, generally speaking, most people hire me by the hour if they want. And I'm quite happy to just do 1 hour with somebody who just wants a little bit of help about one thing. I'm looking to create some proper big courses.
Nice. That would be wonderful.
Publishing at some point. Yeah. Or if you've got a random query, you can email me and I may or may not respond. And that'll be timlewis@stonehemppress.com. So there is some consistency there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate having you. And we have to have you on again, so maybe a couple months from now, we can chat again about some of those other wonderful topics.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Thanks so much for being here again. I'm Andrea with the ADS Agency. Please give us a follow at THEADS Agency. The ADS Agency, like ads, like advertising. That's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcast. If you're listening to this on podcast, Google Play, Spotify, Apple. Please be sure to subscribe, leave a review. I read all the comments. I really, really love reading them. So please keep them coming. And furthermore, we are now on Clubhouse. I'm on as my own personal self, but as always tied to the ADS Agency. So you can find me at MISSADS08 on Clubhouse. Darlings, find me now, okay? That's the same for TikTok too. All right, thank you so much. And finally, if you are watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. The button is below. Hit subscribe, then hit the notifications bell after that, or else I promise you, darlings, you won't see this ever again, okay? You gotta hit the notifications bell. Same for Clubhouse. All right, see you later.